Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gautama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee Kap. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our group learning program, and we're studying Chapter 17 in this book, Developing a Life Practice, The Path That Leads to Enlightenment. This is Volume 1 of the book series titled The Words of the Buddha, The Path to Enlightenment, Revealing the Hidden. This chapter is titled Eliminating Fears. Are You Really Scared? This is where you learn how to eliminate any kind of fears that you might be having in life. Fears are inhibiting you from experiencing your full potential in life. It holds you back from being able to be successful in life because you might fear failure, and then you might not even try because you are fearing to fail. So therefore you actually sabotage your ability to go forward in life. Or you might fear things like spiders or snakes or certain people or certain places in the world. As long as you have fear, it's going to inhibit you from being able to experience your full potential in life. So eliminating fear is one of the aspects of getting to enlightenment. By the time an individual gets to enlightenment, they will have no fear at all, including the fear of death. So I'm going to help you today understand what's causing your fears and then helping you to understand how to eliminate them. I'm going to be sharing with you a core and central teaching of the Buddha, a very first teaching that the Buddha has to be able to help you understand what's causing the fear in the mind. And then after I share that, I'm going to then share with you specifically how to eliminate fears. In order to help you understand what's causing the fears, I need to share with you a teaching called the Three Universal Truths and the Four Noble Truths. For some of you guys, this will be a refresher. You've already studied this and learned this with me at different times, but you'll be able to hear things potentially in a slightly different way to be able to then help you further understand and more deeply soak this into the mind. For some of you guys, this might be the first time you've ever heard me teach the Four Noble Truths. And if so, you'll be able to then learn what's causing these discontent feelings in the mind, including fear. And then after I share with you the Four Noble Truths, I'm going to then help you understand how to eliminate your fears. Something very specific that you can be doing to almost surgically go in and remove your fears. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you've been joining regularly. Welcome to our class today. As we go, you're welcome to ask any and all questions. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand and ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. I'm going to be using some visual aids here to help me share the teachings with you to be able to understand what's causing your discontent feelings so that then you can actually eliminate them. In order to understand the Four Noble Truths, you need to first understand the Three Universal Truths. But as I introduce you to any and all teachings related to the path to enlightenment, I often like to share with students to ensure that you're not believing anything that I share. You shouldn't believe anything that I share, anything that I write in books, or anything that anybody else shares with you related to the teachings of the Buddha or anything in life. It's important that you get to wisdom. And in order to get to wisdom, you need to be able to learn teachings, examine them, investigate them. You need to be able to reflect on those teachings to independently verify them. And you need to practice them in order to transform the mind. As you're doing this, you're acquiring wisdom. That's what it takes in order to get to enlightenment, is to acquire wisdom. And you can't do that through belief. So the teachings of the Buddha aren't about believing a bunch of things and then hoping that something good happens when you die. Instead, you're learning his teachings, you're reflecting on them to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them in order to train the mind and uproot certain pollutions out of the mind. What you're awakening to on the path to enlightenment is the natural laws of existence. These natural laws that the Buddha taught 2,500 years ago are the same exact natural laws that exist today. So as you're learning and practicing his teachings, you're getting to wisdom about these natural laws so that you can make wiser decisions that lead to wholesome results. As long as you lack wisdom of these natural laws, you will naturally make unwise decisions that then produce unwholesome results. The mind will struggle and have difficulties when it doesn't understand the world around you. So as long as you don't understand these natural laws of existence, you will struggle with things like anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, boredom, loneliness, shyness, resentment, jealousy, having certain displeasure in the mind. You'll lack concentration. You'll have difficulties in your relationships because the mind, with this lack of wisdom, is making unwise decisions that's producing unwholesome results. But as you gradually learn, as you gradually reflect, to independently verify these teachings, you're gradually training the mind. You'll experience this gradual progress on the path to enlightenment. You've done this same thing as it relates to other natural laws in your life. At one time, none of us understood the natural law of gravity. As we were growing up, we fell down, we hit our head, we broke open our knee, maybe our elbow, maybe we broke our toys, or we broke other things of other people, and we really struggled and had difficulties as we were doing that. So as we learned, as we reflected, and as we practiced this natural law of gravity, slowly but surely we started making wiser decisions. Because when we had a lack of wisdom, we made unwise decisions related to this natural law of gravity, and it produced unwholesome results in our life. But then we started learning, we started growing, we started developing. And by the time we got to 10, 12, 14, 16, we fully awoke to the natural law of gravity, where we fully understood it. We had fully cultivated wisdom of this natural law of gravity. So we started tying our shoes a little bit tighter. We started looking at the surface of the sidewalk, ensuring that we could walk in a stable way. We stopped being so giddy and so excited everywhere we went, jumping around, bopping around. When we fall down, we hurt ourselves. We learned not to do those things. We learned to place things that were important for us in certain places that they wouldn't easily get broken. We started making wiser decisions about the natural law of gravity because we had wisdom. We fully awoke to it, and now we experience wholesome results related to the natural law of gravity. We can climb ladders, we can ride bicycles, maybe we can ride motorcycles or motorbikes, we can get on airplanes and fly all over the place. We can make wiser decisions that are producing more wholesome results. And because of that, we no longer struggle and have difficulties related to the natural law of gravity. And the same thing needs to occur for all these natural laws of existence that the Buddha taught. You're gradually awakening to these through learning, reflecting, and practicing. So as I teach you today, these natural laws, starting with the three universal truths and the four noble truths, it's important that you don't believe the teachings that I'm sharing with you. Because with belief, you don't know what's true or false. You can't get to wisdom with belief. So as you learn, reflect, and practice, you get to this wisdom. And I'm going to help you do that as I'm sharing the teachings with you, starting with this very first teaching of the three universal truths. Then we're going to move into the four noble truths, where you can have this breakthrough to finally understanding what's causing your discontent feelings so that then you can actually eliminate them. We call them the three universal truths and the four noble truths because the Buddha knew that they were true. And I know that they're true. And other people know that they're true as well. But in order for you to benefit from them, you need to be able to know that they're actually true. And that's why you're not believing them, but you're learning, reflecting, and practicing to get to wisdom. So hear this first universal truth of impermanence. This is where you understand that conditioned objects, they arise, they change, and they fade away. They are impermanent, meaning they are not permanent. And all the things around you are impermanent. These are conditioned objects. So all the material possessions that you have around you are impermanent. Then there's something called unconditioned objects, that they do not arise, they do not change, and they do not fade away. Enlightenment is an unconditioned object, and the natural laws of existence are an unconditioned object. This is why the enlightened mind, once you attain it, is a permanent mental state. And this is why the same natural laws that the Buddha taught during his lifetime are the same natural laws now. So his teachings are timeless. They apply during his lifetime and they apply now. So this universal truth of impermanence is teaching you that things arise, they change, and they fade away. This is the learning part of this. And now you need to move from the learning over to the reflection, where you're starting to independently verify whether this is true or whether this is false. And what you do is you look at your own direct experience in life. You look at things around you and see if you can find something that's permanent. So you start with something maybe that you're familiar with, like this physical body. And you ask yourself, is this body permanent or is it impermanent? Meaning it's constantly changing. So is this body and has this body been exactly the same your whole life, or is it constantly changing? You ask yourself that question. You peer into it and you try to determine this truth for yourself. So if you look at the physical body, you can see that it's constantly changing. You're getting taller or shorter, you're getting more fat, you're getting wrinkles maybe, you're getting gray hair perhaps, your teeth came in, then they fell out, then another set of teeth came in, and then they started getting cavities. Your hair's growing, maybe you're losing your hair, maybe you get a mole or a pimple. This is all change with the physical body. Then you can look at your relationships and ask yourself, are your relationships permanent or are they impermanent? If your relationships are permanent, you've had exactly the same people in your life your entire life. If your relationships are impermanent, that means people have been coming and going in and out of your life throughout your life. So ask yourself, are your relationships permanent or are they impermanent? Well, of course, they're impermanent. Then you might look at something like your bank account. Is your bank account permanent or is it impermanent? If your bank account's permanent, I mean it's the same balance all the time. If it's impermanent, it's going up and down and up and down. Some people it goes down, down, down. Other people it go up, up, up. This is the impermanent nature of your bank account. Then you can look at the weather and ask yourself, is the weather permanent or impermanent? If it's permanent, it's the same weather all the time. It never changes. If it's impermanent, that means some days it's sunny, some days it's raining, some days it might be snowing. You might get a windstorm, a sandstorm. You might get a tornado or a hurricane or a typhoon or something of this nature. So the weather is also impermanent. So you can look around the world in order to soak this into your mind. As you're walking down the street, you see a crack in the sidewalk. That's impermanence. As you look at a fence that was maybe painted and now you see the paint is fading, that is impermanence. You can look around you and see that there's impermanence everywhere around you. So this is the universal truth of impermanence. So you can learn it, you can reflect on it, and then you can practice by going out into the world and deeply soaking it into the mind. Then there's this other universal truth, this universal truth of discontentedness. Some people refer to this as suffering. If you've ever studied the teachings of the Buddha in other places, you might have seen this word suffering being used. I don't use this word related to this particular universal truth because it doesn't fully describe what the Buddha was actually teaching. So I'm going to explain to you what this universal truth is. Then I'm going to circle back and help you understand why I don't use the word suffering. So the word that's in the original source teachings in the Pali Canon is the word dukkha. And this translates to discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. Because what the Buddha is doing here is he's describing to you what the unenlightened mind is experiencing. He explains these conditioned feelings, that the unenlightened mind experiences pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. The pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. It's very pleasant for the mind to experience those. Then there's painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. These are very painful for the mind to experience. Then there's feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. I put boredom and loneliness here, but some people say that that's quite painful for them. So you could put that into the painful category if you like. There's things like shyness where you might decide that that's not painful and it's not pleasant. Or maybe if you sat next to somebody on public transportation and your body was touching their body and you don't know this person. So maybe the mind is experiencing displeasure or an unsatisfactory condition. It's neither painful nor pleasant. So you wouldn't say it's pleasant to be sitting next to that person with your body touching them. You wouldn't say it's painful. It's neither painful nor pleasant. The mind is unsatisfied or uncomfortable. So these are the three feelings that the unenlightened mind experiences: pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. And these are conditioned feelings. It's based on some condition. So if you wake up in the morning as an unenlightened being and you see that it's sunny outside, you might get so excited because you can go hiking and you can go outside. You're going to spend time with your friends and you get happy and excited and elated or thrilled because of this. But then you go take a shower and now you come out and you see it's raining, and now you might get sad or frustrated. That's because you formed a conditioned feeling. The feeling of happiness or excitement or elation was based on the condition of the sun. And because that sun is impermanent, now when it switched, the feeling changed too. Because your feeling of happiness was based on some condition, that condition is not permanent. So therefore, your feeling of happiness is not permanent either. That means that feeling of happiness arose, it changed, and it faded away. And then ultimately your mind ended up in the frustration or the sadness or irritation or some other discontent feeling that was painful, because the mind went into that pleasant feeling and then it dropped off into the painful feeling because it was basing its inner feelings on some condition. This is what's called conditional feelings, and this is what the unenlightened mind's going to experience. It's basing its inner feelings on some condition. But the enlightened mind doesn't do this. It's beyond this pleasure and pain. It's beyond these conditional feelings. It's experiencing unconditioned mental qualities where the mind is just always happy. It's always joyful. It's always peaceful. It's always calm. It's not based on any condition. So an enlightened being can wake up in the morning and they're already happy and joyful before they ever see that it's sunny outside. And now when they see that it's sunny outside, all right, sweet, we're going to go outside, we're going to go hiking, we're going to spend time with our friends or our family or something like that. And now you go take a shower, and as an enlightened being, you come out and you see it's raining outside. Okay, well, it's raining outside. Maybe we can go to the mall. Maybe I can invite my friends over for dinner and I'll cook dinner for them. Maybe I'll stay home and read a book. You'll just do something else and you can maintain your joy because your joy wasn't based on the sun. You were already joyful in an unconditioned mental quality, that it wasn't based on the sun. So therefore you can maintain your joy whether it's sunny outside or it's raining outside. But in the unenlightened state, you won't be able to do that because you're forming conditioned feelings. The unenlightened mind can only be happy if this condition is met, and this condition is met, this condition is met, this condition is met. When these conditions are met, then you'll be happy. And the amount of time that you can be happy becomes fewer and fewer and less and less and less, the more craving, desire, attachment that you have, which is what we're going to talk about here in a moment. So these discontent feelings, the mind is going up and down and up and down and up and down in the unenlightened state. And this is called being discontent or having discontentedness, or the mind is discontented. Now, some people refer to this as suffering. I don't use that word because the word suffering accurately describes the painful feelings. When you're sad, angry, frustrated, or feeling fear or stress or anxiety, you might say you're suffering. But when you're experiencing that conditional happiness, when you get so happy that it's sunny outside, you wouldn't say you're suffering there most likely. Or if you were sitting close to somebody and your body was touching their body, you probably wouldn't say you were suffering, that the feeling that you're experiencing is not suffering, that the mind is maybe discontented, or experiencing discontentedness. So using this word discontentedness, this represents all three feelings, the full spectrum of what the Buddha was describing here. Whereas if you use the word suffering, it's only explaining the painful feelings. So you're only understanding 33% of what the Buddha taught. That means you're missing 66% of what he taught. And if you're missing 66% of what a teacher is teaching, you're not going to be able to experience the results of the enlightened mind. So if you use the word discontent, discontented, or discontentedness, this will bring you to a full understanding of what the Buddha was actually teaching here. And when you read books or you hear other teachers teaching, you can just replace the word suffering with discontentedness, and you'll be able to fully understand what the teachings of the Buddha are, because what you're working to do is eliminate these conditional feelings so that you can get to the unconditioned mental qualities of peace and joy. You can learn how to enjoy life without actually being attached to it and cling to it and holding on to any of these conditioned feelings. And by the way that you independently verify this one, the discontentedness, is that you look at your life and you look at the experiences that you've had, and you look at the various feelings that you've had throughout the course of your life, and you ask yourself, does this accurately represent what you experience? Because if this is a universal truth, then that means that it applies universally, that you'll see all unenlightened beings experiencing these conditioned feelings. And all the feelings that you've been experiencing in life will map into one of these three. So you can do that work and see that all the feelings that you ever experience are either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. The Buddha's fully describing what the unenlightened mind is experiencing. But you'll need to do that independent reflection, because this is your own independent journey to enlightenment, where you're cultivating wisdom with the guidance of a teacher. Then there's this third universal truth of non-self. This is where you're learning and helping the mind to no longer cling to this body or this mind as being who you are. There's 10 individual pollutions that the Buddha discovered. They're referred to as the 10 fetters. Some people refer to them as taints or pollutions or defilements. The word fetter comes from the shackle and the chain and the ball that is around the leg of a prisoner. This keeps a prisoner trapped in a certain area. So these 10 fetters are keeping the mind trapped in the unenlightened state. And as long as these 10 fetters are in the mind, you'll continue to experience discontentedness. But you need to eliminate these from the mind and eradicate them in order to experience the brightness and the radiance and the joy of the enlightened mind. The very first fetter is called personal existence view. And this universal truth of non-self is the solution to that, helping you to understand how to eliminate that personal existence view from the mind. So let me explain to you what personal existence view is. We just talked about this last week in our class, and then I'll teach you what the universal truth of non-self is. The personal existence view is how the mind clings and holds on to this body or this mind, thinking that this is you. It has a misunderstanding. It has a misperception. It's confused. It thinks that this self-image of the body or this self-identity that the mind is holding on to is you and who you are. And as long as the mind is clinging to these things, you'll continue to experience discontentedness. So if you have a certain self-image that you're trying to project in the world, if you spill chocolate ice cream or spaghetti sauce on your clothes and you're in a social situation, you will experience embarrassment. Or if somebody compliments you and says, wow, you're really handsome, or you're really beautiful, or oh, I really like your hair, or that shirt brings out the colors of your eyes, you might experience this conditioned pleasant feeling. Based on the condition of hearing this compliment about the self-image, you will get those pleasant feelings. But then it's only a matter of time before somebody says something degrading and disparaging about this self-image. And if you allow the mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings in that situation where they're complimenting you, now when somebody's saying something degrading or disparaging about this physical body, then you will experience the painful feelings. So this is what's happening when the mind is having personal existence view clinging to this body. You might look in the mirror and you see a pimple or a mole or a wrinkle or gray hair, or you might notice you're losing your hair. You might notice there's some fat here or there, and you might be shaken up by this because you're not being perceived in the world the way you want to be perceived. You want this body to look a certain way permanently. And now the mind clings to this self-image, and now the mind is shaken up whenever there's change. Or you might have certain self-identity in the mind based on your culture, your ethnicity, your nationality, maybe your sexual orientation or your job or your occupation. There's a certain amount of I am in the mind, like I am Singaporean, or I am Malaysian, or I am American, or I am Russian, or I am Belgian, or I am a Brit, or I am an Aussie, or I am Brazilian, or any of this other I am. maybe your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, or even your job. Like, I am an electrician, or I am a construction worker, or I am a police officer, or I am a lawyer. All of this I am is being held on to in the mind. And if you hear something that's agreeable to you, where somebody's talking positively about anything that the mind's holding on to as a self-identity, you can get those pleasant feelings. But then if you hear disagreeable things related to the self-identity that the mind's holding on to, you might get painful feelings of sadness, anger, and frustration. And you can't control what other people say or what other people do. So for example, if you're in a restaurant and 2 tables over, somebody's talking about your nationality in a degrading and diminishing way, or maybe your job or your sexual orientation or your culture or something like that, you might get really angry and frustrated. That's because the mind's clinging, holding on to this self-identity in the mind, thinking that this is who you are. Or say you've been in a job for a period of time where you start to identify with this job as who you are. Like, I am an electrician, or I am a construction worker, I am a police officer, I am a lawyer, I am a doctor. And now when maybe you lose your job or maybe you retire, you really struggle and you don't feel whole anymore because this job that you were doing, you adopted it as your identity. And now when things start changing, you feel like a part of you is missing or a part of you is gone. The same thing can happen when you're in a relationship. If you are a boyfriend or a girlfriend or husband or wife, you can assume the identity of I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I am a husband, I am a wife. This I am that the mind is holding on to. And now when you're together, you might feel happy and feel good about yourself. But then when you're separated and you're apart from this person, you might realize that, whoa, I am not a boyfriend anymore. I am not a girlfriend. I'm not a husband. I'm not a wife. This self-identity is no longer intact because things have changed. And now you might struggle. You might feel lost or feel unwhole, or you might feel worthless or depleted or deflated because you're no longer in that role. The mind is no longer securely in this identity of I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend, I'm a husband, I'm a wife. And you might have even found that your mind was trying to hurry up and get right back into another relationship because you wanted to assume that identity. You wanted to hold on to that role because you thought this was you. And you might have felt lost in the world when you weren't in that particular role. So these are some of the challenges that the mind experiences because of its personal existence view, that pollution, that fetter, that taint, that defilement. Well, the universal truth of non-self is helping you to realize non-self, to realize that there is no self here, that this self-image and this self-identity that the mind is clinging to, that's not who you are. You aren't this body and you aren't this mind. There is no you there. But the challenge is that the mind's going to cling to this body or cling to this mind, thinking that this is who you are. So now the mind will struggle and have these various difficulties in the world. There is a body and there is a mind, and now they've come together, and we call this a person. But the mind needs to eliminate its clinging to the body and clinging to the mind, thinking that this is who you are. And if you can do that through training your mind to realize non-self over a consistent long-term period, you'll get liberated from any feelings that the mind is experiencing related to clinging to this image or clinging to this identity. That now when somebody says something degrading and disparaging about where you were born or your sexual orientation or your ethnicity or anything like that, you're unaffected by it because there is no you here. The mind has been trained to let that go. Or if you see a wrinkle or you see a gray hair, you see a pimple, you're not shaken up by it because you realize this body isn't you. This body is impermanent. It's going to be constantly changing. So the way that you can independently verify that there is no self is you can think about your childhood, your teenage years, your early adulthood, and even your time now. And think about how you viewed yourself in terms of your character and your personality. Has it been exactly the same your entire life, or has it been constantly changing over time? Well, of course, it's been constantly changing. You've been looking at yourself in a different way because there is no permanent self. It's been constantly changing. There is no you there. Another way that you can do this is you can think about if your arm was amputated and you only had one hand and one arm. Ask yourself, are you less of a person? Now that you only have one hand and one arm, are you less of a person? And what most people say is, no, I'm not less of a person. I have less use of a hand and arm, but I'm not less of a person. So that means intellectually, you understand that this body is not you. It's not who you are. But that confusion, that misunderstanding that the mind has, that lack of wisdom, that misperception, is that the mind's clinging to this body thinking that this is you. So now in a situation where somebody says something degrading or disparaging about this body, you might get upset or angry or frustrated. But intellectually, you know that this body is not you. You can confirm that. Then the third way you can independently verify this is you can point to yourself. Sometimes I ask students, where are you? Point to yourself. And they will either point to the chest or they will point to the head. And you need to look at what you're pointing to. What are you truly pointing to when you're pointing to the chest? Well, you're pointing to a shirt. So if you took off this shirt and you hung it up and held it by your hand and you pointed to it, I would ask you, is that you? Is this shirt you? Is that who you are? And most people say, no, that shirt's not me. That's not who I am. Okay, well, let's throw that shirt away. Now, where are you? And someone might point again. And you look at, what are you pointing to? Well, you're pointing to skin. So if we peeled off the skin and we held it up by our hand and we pointed to it, is that who you are? Are you the skin? And most people say, no, I'm not the skin. That's not who I am. Okay, well, let's throw away the skin. Well, now, where are you? And someone might point. Well, what you've got now is you've got bones, you've got muscle tissue, you've got organs, you've got fluids. What part of that is you? Well, none of that is you. But the misperception, the misunderstanding, the confusion that the unenlightened mind has is that this body is you. And you can train your mind to see that that's not you. It's not who you are, that there is no you there. These are just physical structures that have come together for this life. And they are impermanent. They are not permanent. So I'm going to pause here and open up to any questions that you guys have to ensure that you understand the three universal truths before we move forward in our class today. You can ask questions through Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Slav has a question in Zoom. Go ahead, sir.
Teacher Dave, I have a question for you. So if we eliminate ego, it's the same time we eliminate discontent and all 10 fetters.
So eliminating, oh, sorry, I thought you were done.
Yeah, I'm done.
Okay, so eliminating the ego and eliminating the 10 fetters is not the same thing. Eliminating the fetter of personal existence view and eliminating the fetter of conceit is eliminating the ego. But there's other fetters besides personal existence view and conceit. Those are just 2 out of the 10. So in order to fully liberate the mind, you've got to eliminate all 10. And that's where the mind will then be peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. Eliminating personal existence view and conceit, the mind has dissolved the ego, eliminated the ego, and now you won't experience any symptoms related to the ego being in place. So that's why last week I taught what the ego is related to personal existence view and conceit, so that you can see it in its own symptoms that it's producing, so that then you can work to eliminate it.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes, you're welcome. And then what you do as you progress on the path is you fully eradicate all the 10 fetters, so that then you can get to liberation and peacefulness, where the mind's always peaceful. Okay, let me see if we have any other questions anywhere. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions anywhere, so let me continue on. This is another building block that you need in order to understand the Four Noble Truths. This is the definition of craving, desire, attachment, also described as expectations, wants, holding, grasping, clinging. If your mind can understand this, you'll understand the Four Noble Truths. What craving, desire, attachment is this is a mental longing for something with a strong eagerness, where the mind's pulling in the direction of the objects of its affection, wanting things to be a certain way, longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, almost like the mind is thinking that the next new shiny object waiting around the corner is going to provide some kind of lasting satisfaction. So the mind chases after it and chases after it and chases after it. And if you get what you want, the mind experiences pleasant feelings. If you don't get what you want, you get painful feelings. So we're going to explain this a bit in the Four Noble Truths. But first, to understand craving, desire, attachment, be sure you're understanding this definition, and then you reflect on it and see any situations where you've experienced this. So if you were in the mall and you noticed a pair of shoes or a new phone or a computer or a video game, or maybe there was a certain boyfriend or girlfriend, you really wanted these things. You felt your mind pulling towards that. The mind's longing, yearning for these things. That's what the craving, desire, attachment is. It's inside the mind. It's not the object itself. It's the longing, yearning within the mind. That's the craving, desire, attachment, the wants, the expectations. So this is a building block to now help you understand the Four Noble Truths. So now you can have this breakthrough to finally understanding what the problem is in the unenlightened mind, the cause of that problem, the elimination of it, and the path forward. And if you can understand this and you can independently verify this on your own, as I'm going to help you, now you can once and for all understand what's causing these discontent feelings so that you can actually eliminate them. Because if you didn't understand what was causing these problems, then you wouldn't actually be able to solve it. So I'm going to explain to you in 4 simple statements what the problem is, what the cause of that problem is, the elimination of it, and the complete path forward. So the first noble truth is explaining the problem. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. So when you experience those conditioned feelings, the conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant, this is the problem, because the mind is forming an inner feeling based on some condition. So the mind goes up into those pleasant feelings. And then it's only a matter of time before that changes or fades away, and now you drop off into the painful feelings. That happiness that you experience is only temporary because it's a conditioned feeling. So therefore it's essentially unsatisfactory. Those painful feelings, you don't enjoy those. The anger, the sadness, the frustration, and those neither painful nor pleasant, the shyness, the uncomfortableness, the dissatisfaction, the displeasure. You don't enjoy that. You're not interested in continuing to experience those conditioned feelings because the mind's going to go up and down and up and down. So this is the problem. Everyone that is unenlightened will experience discontentedness. Now the cause of that problem is described in the second noble truth, that discontentedness is caused by our own cravings, desires, attachments, because the mind wants everything to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. So I'm going to explain that a few times and give you some examples so you can reflect on this and verify it. So those conditioned feelings, the discontentedness of pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant, it's caused by the mind's cravings, desires, attachments, the wants, the expectations, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. The mind wants things to be permanent when everything in the world is impermanent. So essentially, if you get what you want, you get those conditioned pleasant feelings, the happiness, the excitement, the elation. If you don't get what you want, you get the painful feelings like sadness, anger, frustration, and others. That's what the mind's experiencing due to the cravings, desires, attachments, the wants, the longing, the yearning, the chasing after the objects of your affection. So now let's use some examples to help you illustrate this and understand it. If you've been in a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend, and when you guys first got together, you might have gotten pleasant feelings based on the condition of having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. Maybe you guys were going to the movies together. Maybe you were having dinner or other meals together, going out to restaurants together. Maybe you were having intimate contact with each other. Maybe you're going to the park. Maybe you're having deep, interesting conversations. Everything was really pleasant at the beginning of this relationship. Now, as the relationship went forward, now you end up breaking up or they ended up leaving you. And now when you split, The mind is experiencing maybe sadness or anger or frustration or loneliness or boredom or some other discontent feeling. Because the mind's craving, it's holding on to this person, wanting them to be permanent. It's not the love that's causing you to experience the sadness or the anger. It's the craving, it's the longing, it's the yearning. Love is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. That doesn't cause somebody to be angry or upset. It's active goodwill towards all beings. That doesn't cause the mind to be angry or sad or frustrated. It's the craving for permanence, that in the unenlightened state, you don't understand the universal truth of impermanence. So the mind's craving and holding on and clinging to this relationship, wanting it to be permanent. And now when you're confronted with this impermanence of the relationship, the unenlightened mind doesn't understand the universal truth of impermanence. So it struggles and it has difficulties. And now it ends up in those painful feelings. You can see the same thing if you ever have heard of somebody dying, or maybe you've gone to a funeral. If you grieved, if you were sad, if you were frustrated, this is the mind experiencing craving, desire, attachment. You are holding on to grandma and grandpa, or mom or dad, wanting them to be permanent. And now, when you're confronted with this impermanence of their death, you might have struggled during that time, feeling sad or miserable or grieving. You're not a bad person that this has been experienced. It's just that the mind has this craving, desire, attachment, wanting them to be permanent. It's not the love that caused the mind to be grieving or sad during that time. It's the craving, desire, attachment. Then, if you ever went to a wedding and you were sad at a wedding, you might have experienced this sadness or this grief due to your craving, desire, attachment, holding on to this person, wanting them to be permanent. So when you see them go off into the world with a partner, you might have struggled with that because you wanted them to be permanent with you. Permanently with you, permanently in the relationship with you and only you. Or if you've ever gone to college, or if you've sent your kids to college and you grieved during that time and you were sad, this is the mind holding on to them, wanting them to be permanent. The mind was confronted with this impermanence, and the unenlightened mind doesn't understand impermanence. So the mind struggles. So another way to say that the mind craves permanence is to say that it does not like impermanence. The unenlightened mind doesn't like when things change. When you start experiencing all this change and all these different things in your life, if you're craving permanence, you will struggle when these things start to change. So you can look at this with relationships, like I just did. You can look at this as with a material object. If you've had a car or some other material object and you purchase this and you got all these pleasant feelings from this thing, well then say you take your car and you park it at a store, and now you come out and see a scratch on your car. Well, it's not the scratch that's causing you to be angry or frustrated or sad. It's not the person who caused the scratch. It's the mind wanting this car to look permanently beautiful. And as long as your mind's craving for this car to look permanently beautiful, when you see the scratch, you'll get frustrated or irritated or annoyed. So you can't experience this car being permanent because it is an impermanent object. It's a conditioned object. It arises, it changes, and it fades away. The paint's going to fade. The tires are going to need to be changed. The upholstery is going to fade away. The window washers are going to need to be changed. This is all due to impermanence, that these things are not permanent. They're constantly changing. But if you crave for this car to look permanently beautiful, you will experience discontentedness when you start seeing this change occurring with the car. So now that you've learned the second noble truth, now you need to start reflecting on it, because you're not interested in believing me. You need to get to wisdom. And the way that you do this is through reflecting on this. You take a certain experience that you've had, either recently or in the recent past, maybe today or yesterday or last week, where you were angry or you were frustrated or you're irritated. Look at that situation. There was something your mind was craving, something you were longing, yearning for. You could even look at a situation when you had conditioned pleasant feelings. There was something your mind wanted. Maybe your mom called you up and said, hey, I'm going to come visit you and I would like to spend some time with you. Maybe you got all excited because mom and dad are coming to visit you. And now maybe they called you on Friday right before the weekend and said, hey, I'm sorry, there's been a change of plans, I can't come to see you. And now maybe you're angry, you're frustrated because your mind got those conditioned pleasant feelings when mom said she was coming. And now when these impermanence happened and things changed, now the mind experienced these painful feelings, this sadness, anger, or frustration. So you can look at a situation in your recent past and you can see where your mind was struggling, where it was having certain discontent feelings because it was craving. Normally, what an individual will do when they're experiencing painful feelings and they lack wisdom of the Four Noble Truths is they will blame somebody else. They will think something external is causing their mind to experience this discontentedness. And now you might think that your mom or dad or your brothers or your sisters or your coworkers or your neighbors or your children or your life partner, you might think they're the ones who are causing you to be angry or they are causing you to be annoyed. And when you have this lack of wisdom and you're thinking something external is causing this, you might push them away. This is aversion. You might push the person away or you might push the situation away. And this doesn't solve the problem. Because if you push this person away or you push the situation away, you're going to just get angry and irritated about something else. It's only a matter of time. If they are the true cause of the problem, when you push them away or you push the situation away, you would never get angry or frustrated ever again because you solved the problem. You pushed them away. But that didn't solve the problem. You just got irritated or annoyed about something else. Or if you falsely believe or you have this misperception or this misunderstanding or this lack of wisdom that it's somebody else that's causing you to be angry or frustrated or having these other conditioned feelings, you might be bitter and harsh and hostile towards them through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. And when you're bitter, harsh, and hostile towards people, they might choose to leave out of your life. Or the third thing you might do is you put your expectations on people and you try to control them because the unenlightened mind thinks if I can just get my cravings fulfilled, then everything will be perfect. If everybody just does things my way in the world, then the world will be perfect. But the problem is that there's 8 billion people in the world and they can't all do things your way. That's not possible because of the universal truth of impermanence. So as long as you're craving for things to be a certain way, as long as you're longing, yearning, and wanting things to be a certain way, if you get what you want, you'll get pleasant feelings. But if you don't get what you want, you'll get the painful feelings. So as it relates to fear, if you have a craving to never see a spider, and then you see a spider, fear will arise. If you have a craving to never see a snake, you only ever want to see other animals like dogs and cats and panda bears and things like this, and you see a snake, now because of your craving, your longing, your yearning, this fear is going to arise when you see a snake because you're craving to never see a snake. Or you might have a fear about losing your money, or you might have a fear of death, or you might have other fears because you're craving and you're holding on. If you're holding on to this existence and you're wanting this life to be permanent, now when you think about your own death or the death of other people, you might have this fear arise in the mind. Or if you get in a car accident and you've experienced a certain amount of pain in a particular car accident, now your mind is experiencing this pain from a previous car accident. And even though you're long past that, your mind is craving to be permanently healthy. The mind wants to permanently be comfortable. It doesn't want to experience that discomfort anymore. So now there's this fear of going off into a car, that perhaps you're going to experience a car accident again. So now the mind fears going and traveling in a car. There can be any number of fears that are in the mind. You can have a fear of failure, that you're afraid of failing because you experience the painful feelings. And now you don't apply for a job because if you apply for this job and you get it, you'll get happy. But there's the potential that you don't get it. And now because of that fear, you just decide to not apply for the job. Or you are afraid to go to a certain place to learn new skills because you're afraid that you can't learn them, right? So these fears are holding you back, not allowing you to reach your full potential because the mind is having these cravings, desires, attachments to have something permanent in your life, and you can't experience that permanence. But as long as these cravings are in the mind, there's this potential for fear to arise or any other discontent feeling can arise as well. So the way that you eliminate this, to just study the Four Noble Truths, but then I'm going to get into something that's specific for fear. But the way you eliminate all discontent feelings is in the Third Noble Truth. The way that you eliminate the discontent feelings is you eliminate cravings, desires, attachments. The elimination of discontentedness is possible by eliminating cravings, desires, attachments. And this is why the Buddha taught breathing mindfulness meditation in generosity. This is training your mind to let go. So if you have these cravings, desires, attachments in the mind, where the mind's holding on, where it's longing, yearning, wanting things to be a certain way, if you get things that way, you will get these pleasant feelings. But if you don't get things the way you want, you'll get the painful feelings. So you can use the breathing mindfulness meditation to train the mind to let go. When your mind is focused on the breath and it moves off the breath, you're cutting that off and letting it go and bringing the mind back to the breath. You're not trying to actually eliminate your thoughts in meditation. You're training the mind to develop mindfulness or awareness of mind. You're training the mind to have concentration where you can focus on the breath. And then whenever the mind moves off the breath, you're training the mind to easily let go. So if when you're practicing breathing mindfulness meditation, 20, 30, 50 times you have to let go, let go, let go, let go, this is helpful. It's training your mind to let go because you have the mindfulness that your mind is aware that it's off the breath. You have the concentration to be able to focus on the breath more and more, and you train your mind to let go. So that then in daily life, with your mindfulness and your concentration, when you're aware that the mind is longing, yearning, it's pulling towards something, in the moment in your daily life, you can cut it off and let it go. So if you're noticing a fear arising in the mind, you can cut it off and let it go. And if you can cut it off as a bodily sensation before it actually becomes a feeling, that's ideal. So your breathing mindfulness meditation is training your mind to have that mindfulness, awareness of mind, the concentration, and the ability to easily let go. Your generosity is also training the mind to easily let go. Because when there's craving, desire, attachment in the mind's going to have clinging where it holds on. My money, my clothes, mine, 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 mine. Everything's mine. So you can train your mind through generosity by giving and sharing your time, effort, energy, and resources. And as you're sharing these things in the world, it trains your mind to let go. So you can train your mind to practice generosity where you don't have any expectation of anything in return, that you just give and share your time, your effort, your energy, and your resources, and this will help your mind to let go and no longer hold on. So these are two important trainings that you need to employ in order to target your craving, desire, attachments, in order to train the mind to let go. But it's the fourth noble truth that is explaining to you the complete solution. The complete solution is the Eightfold Path. The fourth noble truth is explaining to you that the path to eliminating discontentedness is the Eightfold Path. And this is 8 individual factors that you're learning and you're practicing. You're dialing these in closer and closer into your life to be able to then produce a better and better quality mind. It starts with right view. And that's what you've been learning so far, is that you need to establish right view. What right view is having the right view that your mind is causing its own discontentedness, accepting responsibility and accountability for the feelings that you're experiencing. Wrong view would be to blame other people for the feelings that you're experiencing. That would be wrong view, because it's not other people that are causing your mind to be discontent. And you can see that through independently verifying the Four Noble Truths. So if you establish right view more and more, now when you start to get angry or frustrated or irritated, you can sit down and have a conversation with yourself. Look inward and try to figure out, what is it that's causing your mind to be discontent? What are the cravings, desires, attachments, the longing, the yearning? You can figure that out, and then you can work to eliminate them. So where you see the fear arising in the mind, you can look and say, what am I afraid of? What is the craving? I'm craving to never see a spider. Oh, I'm craving to never see a snake. Oh, I'm craving from my bank account to be a certain amount. And when it goes down below that, I get fearful. You can identify your own cravings, desires, attachments if you have right view. If you have wrong view, you'll blame other people for your discontentedness, and you'll never solve it because you'll keep pushing people away. You'll be bitter and harsh and hostile, or you'll put your expectations on people. And if you keep doing that, then you'll keep experiencing it over and over and over and over again. It's like being stuck in a cycle where you keep going around and around and around. But if you can establish right view, where you accept responsibility and accountability for your feelings, and you can see that it's craving, desire, attachment that's causing it, that it's the longing, the yearning, the mind chasing after things. Now you can establish right view and you can look inward to then be able to eliminate your discontent feelings by practicing the entire eightfold path. This is organized in wisdom, moral conduct, and mental discipline. And all the videos and all the books and all the courses and classes and retreats that I teach, I walk you through step by step using the original words of the Buddha so that you can understand what did he teach and what he didn't teach. And then you can dial this into your life more and more closely. The Eightfold Path is the path to enlightenment. This book that I use to share the teachings of the Buddha for this particular program is called Developing a Life Practice, the Path That Leads to Enlightenment. Your life practice is the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the perfect, complete plan of how to get to enlightenment. But you need to understand it in the way that the Buddha taught it, using the original words of the Buddha. And when you understand that and you dial this in closer and closer to your life, this is where the mind will become more peaceful and more joyful, eventually completely eliminating all discontent feelings. You'll notice the concentration, the focus, the clarity of mind, the deep memory. You'll notice your personal, professional relationships will blossom. You'll notice that you're not even in a bad mood anymore, that you're always in a good mood. So this is kind of like 8 dials. If you had a speaker system and then you had these 8 dials that you were tweaking these dials and you're trying to get a better and better quality sound out of these speakers. As you tweak these dials, you'll get a better and better quality sound out of the speakers. The same thing is true when you have a certain mind that is discontent. As you develop this eightfold path and you tweak this more and more closely, you dial this into your life more and more closely, you'll notice that the mind becomes more peaceful and more joyful. It will perform optimally. Just like those speakers are performing more optimally as you dial this in closer and closer, you'll also notice if you dial this eightfold path into your life more and more closely, you'll realize that the mind will perform more optimally, that it will perform the way it was intended to perform, that you get this pollution out of the mind, and now the brightness and the radiance and the joy can shine through because the mind is no longer polluted. You've used these teachings on the Eightfold Path to be able to train the mind to eradicate the pollutions, and now it will perform optimally. So before we move on to talking about the elimination of fears, I would like to pause and see if there's any questions that you guys have related to the Eightfold Path or anything related to the Four Noble Truths. And then I'm going to explain something to you that's specific for eliminating fears. You're going to need to understand the Eightfold Path and practice that. But then there's something specific you can do to eliminate your fears. So if you have questions, you can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and I will see that you have questions in the comment section, and then I'll be sure to answer those during the class. Or if you're in Zoom and you'd like to electronically raise your hand, you can ask any questions or follow-up questions directly. So it looks like we have somebody here that's raising their hand. Let's see if they actually have a question. Go ahead, Alexander. What's your question? Okay, it doesn't look like they're going to come through with their question. So let me see if there's any questions on Facebook or YouTube. All right, I don't see any there either. So let me move forward with helping you understand what to do to eliminate the fears. Now that you understand what's causing them, which is the craving, desire, attachment. And for those of you guys that have studied the Eightfold Path with me in the past, you understand mindfulness and awareness of mind. You understand the Eightfold Path, that there's this mindfulness where the mind is aware of the bodily sensations that's arising, and you can cut off and let go of any discontentedness that is arising as a bodily sensation before it becomes a feeling. So the bodily sensations are an early warning system that are helping you to understand that there's a feeling that's about to arise that is a conditioned feeling. So before your fear, you're going to notice a condition that the bodily sensations are going to start to be triggered. You might notice tightening in the chest, or sensations in the body, or certain sensations in the face or the head. This is an early warning system with your mindfulness that fear is arising. And it's right effort that teaches you to cut off and let go of that. And if you've been doing right concentration, which is to practice breathing mindfulness meditation, it'll be easier and easier for you to cut that off and let it go. So now when you understand that, then the way that you eliminate the fear is you eliminate the craving, desire, attachment that's causing the fear. By placing the mind in the situation that it fears, to desensitize the mind whenever this fear arises, the mind experiencing that bodily sensation, you can cut it off and let it go. You essentially trigger the craving, desire, attachment. So let me give you an example of this. Let's say that you fear spiders or you fear snakes. You can put the mind in the situation. You can start looking at pictures either on the internet or in magazines of spiders and snakes. And as you see these pictures and you notice the bodily sensations of fear starting to arise, you cut it off, you cut it off, you cut it off. With your mindfulness or awareness of mind, you notice the bodily sensations, and then you use right effort to cut it off and let it go. So that's why the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity is so important, to train the mind to let go. And then you increment it up a little bit more. You go from the pictures to now maybe you go to a museum where these spiders and the snakes are preserved and you can see them, but they're dead, they're not alive. And now maybe some of your craving, desire, attachment is being triggered, and you notice these bodily sensations occurring in the body, and then you cut it off and you cut it off and you cut it off. You might need to do that a few times. And then you ultimately go to an environment where there's actual spiders or actual snakes that are alive, and you train your mind to understand the natural law of karma, that you're not causing harm to these snakes. You're not causing harm to these spiders. So therefore, no harm is going to come to you. As long as you're not causing harm to these beings, those beings aren't going to cause you harm. So if you're noticing when you're looking at the real snakes and the real spiders that there's any fear arising, and you're noticing that bodily sensation prior to the mind becoming fearful, you cut it off and you cut it off and you cut it off. You're essentially restraining the mind. And this is why you need the breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity to be in place so that your mind's easily able to cut this off. That's why this wasn't the first chapter in the book, because you need to develop for about 6 months or so to get to the point where your mind's easily able to notice these bodily sensations that are arising and to be able to easily cut them off and let them go. You may not be at the point where you can currently observe the bodily sensations associated with discontentedness that is arising. But as you train your mind in meditation more and more, you'll notice those bodily sensations, and then you can cut them off and let them go, getting to the point where the mind can be peaceful and joyful. And if you do this enough, where you put the mind in these situations, then eventually that craving, desire, attachment will be eliminated. And you'll notice that when you see a spider, you see a snake, that you're not scared. And you'll notice that there's not this fear in the mind, that you're not really scared, that the mind's just having craving, desire, attachment. That's all it is. And you can eliminate the problem, which is the fear. The cause is the craving, desire, attachment. The symptom of fear, that's the problem. But the cause of it is the craving, desire, attachment. And you won't solve this fear by pushing spiders and pushing snakes out of your life. Because if you push snakes and spiders out of your life, it's only a matter of time before you see one. Because you're in this world, you can't permanently only see human beings. You're going to see animals. You're going to see spiders and snakes and other things as well. So you can't permanently eliminate spiders and snakes from the mind. But that's what the unenlightened mind is going to want to do. It's going to want to push things away and think that that solves the problem, but it doesn't, because that's just aversion. So if you put the mind in the situation that it fears and desensitize it, now through desensitizing the mind, seeing spiders, seeing snakes, you can get to the point where you no longer have fear because you've eliminated your craving, desire, attachment. Understanding the natural law of karma, that you're not causing harm to these animals, so therefore they're not going to cause harm to you. You might have a fear of death. If you have a fear of death, you can put your mind in that situation in order to train it to be comfortable. It's called contemplation of death or reflection on death. You can sit somewhere with your eyes closed for maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes, and you can envision that you've died. kind of convincing the mind that you've died, and kind of live this out in your mind, where you're like a fly on the wall and you're kind of envisioning this whole process. Maybe your people that are close to you, like your parents or your siblings or your life partner or your children, maybe you envision them getting a phone call from a police officer or a doctor or a nurse or something like this. You're not aspiring for to die, but you're just kind of playing it out. You're confronting this death as if you have died. And now you play this out. And maybe your family grieves. Maybe they plan a funeral. Maybe they bury you. Maybe they have a cremation. And you kind of play this out and you see that, okay, this body has died. And now you come to terms with that. You may actually grieve. You may actually be sad. You may actually notice fear arising in the mind due to you confronting your own death. But you're going to confront death at some point. You're required to die. It's the only thing that you're ever required to do. Everything else in life is optional, but you're required to die. So you're going to face death at some point. And you can let death sneak up on you where you're unprepared for it, or you can confront death on your terms. So contemplating your death or reflecting on death is confronting death on your terms. And now you live this out in your mind. And now as you grieve or you're sad or you're fearful, you cut that off and you cut that off and you cut that off. Don't allow the mind to experience that conditioned feeling. And now you might need to do this 2, 3, 4, 5 times until you get to the point where you've done it and there's no more fear. There's no more sadness. There's no more frustration that you've died. That you're like, all right, yep, you understand that this body and this mind is impermanent and it's going to come to an end and there's going to be a death at some point. And then you're not craving for existence. You're not holding on to existence. But you're also not craving for non-existence either. That your mind is in the middle. You understand that there is an existence, that there is a body, there is a mind, there is an existence, and you can maintain your contentedness and your joy, where you're not craving existence and you're not craving non-existence. So even if you have fear of your own death, you can do this and confront it. Or if you have fear of the death of your children or your parents or your life partner, you can do this same thing of contemplating death or reflecting on death for them as well. You can envision that they've actually died. And now you might grieve, you might be sad, and you might need to do this several times until you come to terms with, okay, they're going to die. They may or may not die before you. You may even walk away with certain things that you feel like you've never said to them, that if they really truly died, you wouldn't be able to say it to them, or certain things that you need to hear from them. So you might just call them up, or you might go see them and say, hey, Mom, I've always been meaning to tell you, or I've always been meaning to ask you. And then you can clear all those things out. Because once Mom actually dies, you're never going to be able to talk to her ever again. So if you can clear out of your mind any kind of holding on or any kind of craving or clinging, you can have whatever conversation you needed to have. Then when she dies, you're okay, right? You're not grieving, you're not sad. It's not the grief and the sadness. That's not coming from the love that you have. It's coming from the craving, wanting this person to be permanent. So rather than letting death sneak up on you, where you feel like someone's pulled the carpet out from under your legs or chopped you off at the knees, you can do this contemplation of death or this reflection on death for yourself or for other people around you, and you can eliminate this fear. So there's all kinds of fears that you might have. An individual in the unenlightened state might have any number of different fears. But by the time you get to enlightenment, there's no fear whatsoever. So what I'd like to do is stop here, because this is everything that I have to share with you, and see if there's any fears that you have that you would like to talk about. Maybe you would like to share a certain plan or a certain approach that you're going to put your mind into that situation in order to train your mind to let go of its craving, desire, attachment, to eliminate the fear. And I will help you to be able to see how to do that. So if there's any fears that your mind is currently having, and there's certain cravings, desires, attachments, if you need help identifying those, I will help you. If you need help putting together a plan for how to expose your mind to that and desensitize your mind, I can help you with that. So you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody raising their hand or anybody submitting any questions here. So if you guys ever would like help with any of these teachings or understanding how to accomplish what I'm sharing here today, you're always welcome to ask those questions. You can ask them through posting them in the Facebook group. You can ask them in an online class. You can send me a private message, or you can schedule personal guidance. And there, I will be able to help you in any of those 4 ways. So in our next class, which is next Sunday in the group learning program, we're going to be sharing chapter 18, which is titled God's Creative Actions. You have free will. This is helping you to understand that what this being God is, and that you have free will. So I'm going to walk you through understanding this being of God, because you might be interested in having a relationship with God, but you don't know how to do that. Or maybe you're fearful of having a relationship with God based on things that you've learned in the past. Or maybe you're not interested in having a relationship with God. And I'm going to teach you how to get to enlightenment that way as well. So whether you're interested in having a relationship with God or you're not interested, I'm going to teach you how to get to enlightenment either way, whether you have a relationship with God or not, because your enlightenment isn't dependent on God. So I'm going to teach you in either way. And then on Wednesday, we're going to be doing loving kindness meditation and opening up to any and all questions that you might have. So I'd like to thank you all for joining for today's class and invite you to attend any of our future classes. Thank you for joining. We'll perhaps see you in a future class. Have a very wonderful and lovely rest of your day. Sawadee Kap.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.